The theater is already buzzing before he even steps onto the stage. Bright lights sweep across the audience, catching faces filled with anticipation, skepticism and curiosity. This is the moment people dream about, millions watching, one chance to be seen. But for Daniel Reyes, it feels less like a dream and more like standing at the edge of something fragile, something that could break if he breathes too hard. He walks out slowly, almost apologetically, as if he's not sure he belongs here. His shoulders are slightly hunched, his jacket a size too big, the cuffs frayed from years of use, his shoes simple worn, carefully cleaned, tell a story of long days and longer nights. The applause that greets him is polite but thin, the kind given out of habit rather than belief. Daniel squints against the lights. He can't see the audience clearly, just a sea of shadows and movement. Somewhere out there, strangers are already making judgments. He knows this because he's lived with those looks his whole life, the quick scans, the quiet conclusions. The kind that say, this one won't last long. He reaches the center of the stage and stops. His hands tremble, so he clasps them together. The host smiles brightly and asks the usual questions: name, age, where he's from. Daniel answers in a soft voice, almost swallowed by the microphone. I'm Daniel. I'm 32, I'm from a small town. What do you do, Daniel? One of the judges asks. Daniel hesitates, then says, I work nights at a warehouse, loading trucks. A murmur ripples through the audience. It's not cruel, not exactly, but it's dismissive. This isn't the kind of backstory people expect from stars. Simon Cowell leans back in his chair, arms crossed, expression unreadable but already distant. He has seen thousands like Daniel walk onto this stage, hopeful, nervous, and gone within seconds. And why are you here today? Another judge asks. Daniel swallows, his throat feels tight. Because I promised someone I would try. Simon raises an eyebrow, unconvinced. The music cue is given, the band begins the intro, simple, slow. Daniel grips the microphone stand as if it's the only thing keeping him upright. His eyes close for a brief second, and when he opens them, he begins to sing. The first note is shaky, not terrible, but his voice wavers, searching for confidence it hasn't yet found. Within 2 seconds, Simon exhales sharply. He leans forward, presses the buzzer. Boozy. The sound is loud, final, brutal. It cuts through Daniel's voice like a blade. The audience reacts instantly, some gasp, some awkward laughter, some people already turning away emotionally. They've seen this before. Another dream ended early. Another person who wasn't ready. Daniel's voice falters and stops. His shoulders sink. For a moment, it looks like he's going to turn around and walk off the stage without a word. His eyes drop to the floor, and the lights above seem harsher now, unforgiving. Simon straightens in his chair, ready to move on. But Daniel doesn't leave. He takes a breath. Then another. Slowly, deliberately, he lifts his head. Sir, he says quietly, his voice barely steady. May I finish the song? The room shifts. It's subtle at first, a pause, a hesitation, but it's there. The audience quiets, unsure. Contestants almost never ask this. Most are too embarrassed, too defeated. Simon looks at him, surprised by the interruption. Why, he asks bluntly. Daniel's hands are still shaking, but his eyes hold something new now, not confidence but resolve. Because I'm not singing for the competition, he says. I'm singing for my mother. The words land heavier than expected. A few people in the audience lean forward. One judge's expression softens slightly. Simon's face doesn't change, but he doesn't interrupt either. Daniel continues, his voice low but clear. She used to watch this show every night after work. She'd say, one day that'll be you. I told her it wouldn't. He lets out a small nervous laugh. But she never stopped believing. The theater is silent now. No laughter. No whispers. Daniel looks down again, blinking hard. She passed away last year, he adds. This is the first promise I've kept since then. Something in the air changes, the kind of shift you can't explain, only feel. The judges glance at one another. Even Simon pauses, his finger no longer hovering impatiently over the desk. Go on, one of the judges says softly. Daniel nods almost in disbelief. He adjusts his grip on the microphone, closes his eyes once more and begins again. This time, the first note isn't louder. It isn't technically better, but it's different. It carries weight. The music flows back in, gentle and unhurried, as if it too has decided to give Daniel a second chance. The first few notes drift through the theater like a quiet confession. Daniel keeps his eyes closed, not out of fear this time, but focus. The stage, the judges, the cameras, all of it fades until there is only the song and the memory behind it. His voice returns, steadier now, carrying a warmth that wasn't there before. It isn't the kind of voice that demands attention with power or precision. Instead, it invites you in, like someone sitting beside you after a long day and saying, let me tell you something true. The lyrics speak of early mornings and tired hands, of lunches packed with love but little money, of a woman who stood at bus stops in the rain, waving until she could no longer see her son. Daniel sings about sacrifice without ever using the word. He doesn't need to. You can hear it in every syllable, every pause where his breath catches just slightly. In the audience, a woman presses her hand to her mouth. A man lowers his phone, no longer recording but simply listening. The laughter from earlier feels like a distant memory, something embarrassing, something no one wants to claim anymore. Daniel opens his eyes and looks straight ahead, not at the judges, but past them, as if he's singing to someone just beyond the lights. His voice grows fuller, not louder but richer, layered with emotion that no vocal coach could ever teach. He reaches a line about believing when belief was the hardest thing to afford. His voice cracks, not enough to break the song, but enough to reveal the truth underneath it. And instead of weakening the performance, it strengthens it. The crack becomes a doorway. People step through without realizing it, carrying their own memories with them. One judge shifts in her chair, blinking rapidly. Another leans forward, elbows on the desk, eyes fixed on Daniel as if afraid to miss a word. Simon doesn't move, at least, not at first. His expression is still guarded, but something in his posture has changed. He's no longer leaning back with crossed arms. His hands rest flat on the table now. His eyes, sharp and critical moments earlier, are focused, searching. Daniel sings about nights when the world felt too heavy. About wanting to quit, about almost giving up because the dream felt selfish when there were bills to pay and responsibilities waiting. His voice doesn't accuse or complain, it simply tells the story as it was. And somehow, that makes it universal. Parents in the audience hear their own sacrifices echoed back to them. Sons and daughters hear apologies that were never spoken. Strangers realize they are not as alone as they once thought. The band follows Daniel's lead, softening where his voice softens, rising gently when his emotion swells. It feels less like a performance and more like a shared moment, something fragile that could shatter if anyone claps too soon. Daniel's hands have stopped shaking. He loosens his grip on the microphone stand and lets one hand fall to his side. The other lifts slightly, palm open, as if offering the song to the room. His breathing evens out. Confidence doesn't arrive all at once, it seeps in slowly, earned not borrowed. Simon tilts his head, listening closely now. There's something familiar in the tone Daniel has found, not in the voice itself, but in the intention behind it. Simon has heard thousands of singers chase applause. Very few sing like this. For the first time, Simon doesn't think about marketability or record deals. He thinks about his own mother. About long drives. About encouragement that came before success. About how easy it is to forget the people who believed when belief was inconvenient. Daniel reaches the chorus again, and this time he doesn't push. He trusts the moment. The notes land exactly where they need to, unforced and sincere. The room seems to breathe with him. A single tear slips down Daniel's cheek. He doesn't wipe it away. He lets it fall unashamed. In the audience someone sniffles. Then another. A chain reaction of quiet emotion spreads through the seats. No one speaks. Even the cameras seem to slow, lingering instead of cutting away. Simon's jaw tightens, not in irritation but restraint. His eyes don't leave the stage. His finger, which had hovered so confidently over the buzzer moments ago, remains still now, almost forgotten. Daniel finishes the final line softly, letting the last note trail off like a whisper. The music fades with it, leaving behind a silence so deep it feels sacred. For a heartbeat no one reacts, and in that silence, something becomes clear to everyone in the room. This song was never meant to win a competition. It was meant to be heard. The silence after the final note doesn't feel empty. It feels full, heavy with everything that has just been shared and nowhere to go. The kind of silence that presses against the chest and makes people afraid to breathe too loudly, in case they break something delicate. Daniel stands at center stage, eyes still closed, as if he's afraid that opening them will shatter the moment. His shoulders rise and fall slowly. He doesn't bow. He doesn't smile. He simply stands there, vulnerable and waiting. The audience remains motionless. Simon Cowell doesn't move. His hand rests on the table, fingers spread, the red buzzer glowing inches away. He has pressed it thousands of times in his career, sometimes without hesitation, sometimes mid-note. It's muscle memory, judgment as instinct, and yet now his hand feels strangely heavy, as if gravity itself has doubled. He stares at Daniel, but he's not really seeing him. He's seeing something else. A small rehearsal room, a voice that wasn't perfect but was eager. A moment from decades ago when success was still theoretical and belief came from only one place. Simon's jaw tightens, he swallows. For the first time in years, Simon feels something dangerously unfamiliar on this stage. Uncertainty. The audience begins to shift, unsure whether to clap. They glance toward the judges, searching for permission. This show has rules, rhythms, expectations, and yet, none of them seem to apply here. One of the judges reaches for her microphone, then stops, sensing the weight of the moment. Another judge watches Simon closely, eyebrows knit in concern and curiosity. Daniel finally opens his eyes. He looks toward the judges, bracing himself. His gaze lands on Simon instinctively. Everyone knows Simon's opinion matters most. It always has. Daniel's chest tightens as he sees the red X still glowing above the stage, a reminder of rejection that hasn't yet been erased. Simon meets his eyes, and then something extraordinary happens. Simon doesn't stretch. 5, 10. The audience holds its breath. Simon's confident posture softens. He leans forward slightly, elbows resting on the desk, as if closing the distance between himself and the man on stage. His expression isn't harsh now. It's searching, almost careful. He opens his mouth to speak, then closes it again, The pause is electric. Cameras zoom in on his face, capturing a rare crack in the armor. This is the man known for sharp words and instant judgments, the man who rarely hesitates, and yet here he is, frozen by a song that wasn't supposed to matter. Simon exhales slowly, rubbing his thumb against the edge of the table. He begins then stops. A murmur ripples through the audience. People shift in their seats. This isn't part of the script. Daniel's hands clench at his sides. He expects criticism. He's prepared for it. He's had a lifetime of practice. But what he sees instead is something far more disarming. Respect. Simon looks down briefly, gathering his thoughts, then back up at Daniel. His voice, when he finally speaks, is quieter than anyone expects. You know, Simon says slowly, I pressed my buzzer because I thought I knew where that was going. A few nervous chuckles ripple through the crowd, but Simon doesn't smile. And I was wrong. The room freezes all over again. Daniel blinks, unsure he heard correctly. Simon continues, his tone measured, sincere. That wasn't about being perfect. That wasn't even about singing. Really, he gestures toward Daniel. That was about honesty. He pauses, choosing his words carefully. And honesty is something you can't fake. The audience begins to applaud softly at first, as if testing whether it's allowed. Simon raises a hand not to stop them, but to finish what he's saying. I've judged thousands of people on this stage, he says. Most of them want something from us: fame, approval, validation. He looks directly at Daniel again. You weren't asking for any of that. Simon's voice tightens, just slightly. You were giving something. The applause grows louder now. People stand. A wave of emotion sweeps through the theater, undeniable and earned. Daniel's eyes fill with tears. He shakes his head gently, overwhelmed. Thank you, he whispers into the microphone, though he's not sure who he's thanking. Simon, the audience, or the mother he feels so close to in this moment. Simon glances toward the buzzer again. For the first time since pressing it, he acknowledges it openly. He reaches out slowly, deliberately, and with a decisive motion, he switches it off. The red X above the stage fades. The audience erupts. Cheers, applause, whistles, sounds of celebration crash through the room, replacing the earlier silence. But Simon doesn't join in. He watches Daniel, eyes steady, expression reflective. Sometimes, Simon says quietly into his microphone, almost to himself, the most dangerous thing a judge can do is decide too quickly. The words hang in the air, heavier than any critique. Daniel stands taller now, not because he's been validated, but because he's been understood. The applause eventually softens, like waves retreating after crashing against the shore. People settle back into their seats, still buzzing, still wiping tears, still replaying the last few minutes in their minds. Daniel remains on stage, unsure what to do with his hands, his heart still pounding as if he's just finished running a mile. Simon studies him for a moment longer, then nods gently. Daniel, he says, I want you to tell us something. Daniel shifts his weight, nerves creeping back in. Yes, sir. You said this song was for your mother, Simon continues. Tell us about her. The question feels simple, but Daniel's chest tightens immediately. He lowers his head, drawing in a slow breath. This is harder than singing, harder than standing under lights in front of millions. My mom's name was Elena, he begins. His voice is steady at first, but fragile underneath. She wasn't famous. She wasn't extraordinary in the way people usually mean it. He pauses, then looks up. But she was everything to me. The audience leans in. She worked 2 jobs most of my life, Daniel says. Cleaning offices in the morning, working at a diner at night. She'd come home exhausted, but every time this show was on, she'd sit down like it was an event. A small smile tugs at his lips. She'd clap for people she'd never meet. She believed in strangers. A few soft laughs ripple through the crowd, warm and affectionate. Daniel continues. When I was a kid I used to sing around the house. Not because I was good, he shrugs lightly, but because it made her smile. And she'd always say, one day, you'll sing on that stage. He gestures around him. I told her that was ridiculous. People like us don't get chances like that. His voice wavers now. But she never agreed with me. Simon listens intently, his face unreadable but attentive. She got sick about 3 years ago, Daniel says. At first we thought it was nothing. She still went to work, still cooked, still asked me why I wasn't practicing singing anymore. He laughs softly, then swallows hard. She didn't want me to give up, even when she was the one who should have been resting. The theater is silent again, but this time the silence feels tender. She passed away last year, Daniel says quietly. The night before we watched this show together. His hands tremble, and he clasped them together again. There was a singer who messed up at the start. Simon buzzed him. A few knowing chuckles ripple through the crowd. Daniel looks toward Simon. My mom said, I hope he gets another chance. Simon's expression shifts, his eyes soften. I didn't think much of it at the time, Daniel continues. But after she was gone, I kept hearing her voice in my head, telling me to stop being afraid, telling me to try. He takes a breath. So I promised her I would. The weight of the promise settles over the room. One of the judges wipes at her eyes openly now. Another nods slowly as if something deeply personal has been confirmed. Simon clears his throat. Daniel, he says, his voice lower, less polished than usual. You realize how close you were to walking off that stage when I pressed that buzzer? Yes, sir, Daniel answers honestly. I almost did. Why didn't you? Simon asks. Daniel doesn't hesitate. Because I didn't come here to win. I came here to finish. The words hit harder than applause ever could. Simon leans back slightly, absorbing that. Most people think this show is about finding the best voice, he says. But moments like this remind me it's really about finding the truest one. He pauses, then adds, and yours came from somewhere very real. The audience applauds again, slower this time, deeper. It's not celebration, it's recognition. Simon looks at Daniel, then at the other judges. I want to be very clear about something, he says. When I pressed that buzzer, I wasn't just stopping a song. I was almost stopping a story. He turns back to Daniel. And that's on me. A collective gasp ripples through the theater. I've been doing this a long time, Simon continues. And sometimes experience can turn into assumption. He shakes his head slightly. Tonight, you reminded me why listening matters more than judging. Daniel's eyes brim with tears again. Thank you, he says softly. Simon nods. No, he replies. Thank you. The host steps forward gently, sensing the moment but careful not to disrupt it. Daniel, she says, smiling warmly. If your mother were here right now, what do you think she'd say? Daniel smiles through his tears. She'd say, see, I told you. The audience laughs, then applauds, many rising to their feet once more. Daniel looks upward for a brief moment, not at the lights but beyond them. His lips move silently, forming words meant for only one person. And in that instant it's clear to everyone watching. This stage didn't just give Daniel a second chance, it gave him closure. And it gave the world a reminder that behind every voice is a life, a loss, and a love that deserves to be heard. The lights dim slightly as the moment draws toward its close, but something intangible stays bright in the room. Daniel remains on stage, breathing in the applause that still rolls gently through the theater, not the explosive kind meant for victory, but the steady kind that carries gratitude and respect. This applause feels different. It isn't just for what he sang, it's for who he allowed himself to be. As the clapping fades, Daniel offers a small, almost shy smile. He nods to the judges, to the cameras, as if trying to thank everyone at once. Then he steps back, preparing to leave the stage, but Simon stops him. Daniel, Simon says, leaning toward his microphone once more. Before you go, I want to say something. Daniel turns, heart jumping again. The room quiets instantly. When Simon speaks now, it isn't with authority, it's with reflection. People watch this show thinking it's about talent. Simon begins. And yes, talent matters. But tonight something more important happened. He gestures gently toward Daniel. We were reminded that the most powerful thing someone can bring into this room is their truth. The audience listens, rapt. You came here carrying a promise, Simon continues. And instead of letting fear or embarrassment silence you, you honored it. That takes courage. He pauses. And courage is something this world desperately needs more of. Daniel swallows hard. His hands curl into loose fists at his sides, not from nerves this time but emotion. Simon adds quietly, your mother would be very proud. The words land softly, but they resonate deeply. Daniel bows his head for a moment, eyes closed, letting himself feel them fully. Somewhere in the audience, someone whispers, Amen. The host steps forward again, smiling through her own emotion. Daniel, you've reminded a lot of people tonight why they should never stop listening, she says. We'll wish you all the best in this competition and in whatever comes next. Daniel nods. Thank you, he says simply. All of you. He turns and begins to walk off the stage. With each step, his posture changes. The man who walked out earlier, shoulders hunched and eyes uncertain, is gone. In his place is someone steadier, not because his life has suddenly become easy, but because he knows his voice matters. As Daniel disappears behind the curtain, the cameras briefly follow him into the shadows. Offstage, a stagehand gives him a quiet thumbs up, another offers a tissue. Daniel laughs softly, wiping his eyes. He leans against the wall for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade. He whispers, barely audible, I did it, Mom. Back on stage, Simon watches the empty space where Daniel stood. The crowd settles, but something in Simon hasn't. He sits back thoughtful, staring at the table in front of him. For the first time in a long while, the buzzer doesn't feel like power, it feels like responsibility. He clears his throat and addresses the audience. We'll live in a time where everyone's quick to judge, he says. Online. In real life, we decide who people are before they finish their first sentence. The audience murmurs in agreement. But tonight, Simon continues, man reminded us that every person has a story, and if you interrupt it too soon, you might miss something extraordinary. The camera cuts to faces in the crowd, a mother holding her child's hand, a young man wiping tears, an elderly couple nodding quietly. The lesson is landing, not as entertainment but as truth. At home, millions of viewers feel it too. In living rooms across the country, people sit a little straighter. Some glance toward family members they've underestimated. Others think about dreams they've set aside because someone once pressed a figurative buzzer on their hopes. The show moves on, as it always does. Another contestant waits in the wings. The lights reset, the music cues up, but the feeling doesn't leave. Later that night, clips of Daniel's audition flood the internet, not because of the buzzer, but because of what came after it. Comments pour in from strangers across the world. This reminded me of my mom. I almost stopped listening once, glad I didn't. Kindness changes everything. Daniel returns home to his small apartment. He places his jacket carefully over a chair and sits on the edge of his bed exhausted. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out an old, folded photo. Him and his mother, smiling in a cramped kitchen. He sets it on the nightstand. For the first time since she passed, the ache in his chest feels lighter, not gone, but softer. He didn't win the competition that night, but he won something far more lasting. He proved that compassion can stop judgment, that patience can turn rejection into understanding, and that sometimes, when the world is ready to silence you, the bravest thing you can do is ask for one more moment to be heard. Final message: never rush to judge, never silence a voice too quickly, because behind every unfinished song is a story that could change a heart, maybe even your own.